Can you make some noise for the man who makes this whole conference happen, Loman Henry? This is no small task to make all this happen. Everybody gathering from all over Pennsylvania, so it really is a wonderful event. I usually am in charge of the weather. Loman actually likes bad weather, so people aren't tempted to go outside and enjoy the sunshine. So we're cloudy and cool today. Just stay indoors and enjoy. One other note to mention, we're here to hold politicians accountable, but today is a different day. It's April Fool's Day, so make sure your spidey senses are tingling today and you're on your guard, just saying. We're really getting things off with a bang here today. He is the former Kentucky governor. He's a husband. He's a father of 9. Can we have a round of applause for 9 children? He's a U.S. Army veteran, small business owner, and recently the 62nd governor of Kentucky. Through initiatives like the red tape reduction and Kentucky Trained, Kentucky Built, he worked to make Kentucky the center of engineering and manufacturing excellence in America. The governor has participated in so many adventurous things. This guy skydives, bungee jumps, he rode his bicycle across the United States, running with the bulls, how about that? And now he's here in Pennsylvania at the PA Leadership Conference. Would you please welcome the former governor of Kentucky, Matt Bevin.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. It's an honor for me to be here. I'm grateful for the invitation. I'm grateful for those of you who have taken the time to be here. A lot of places you might have been. I do find it a little interesting that they thought to themselves, you know, it's April Fool's Day. What sucker can we get to kick this thing off? We'll get that Bevin guy. Perfect. But no, it really is an honor. Those of you that are engaged to this degree are the difference makers. You just are. It's that simple. And over the next few minutes, we'll have a chance to talk. But I'm just grateful to you for taking the time. Of all the things you might have done on a Friday and tomorrow on a Saturday, that you've taken the time to be here. And I wonder why that is. Why is it that you're here? We'll talk about that a little bit. It wasn't that many years ago, truth be told, when you look at the continuum of history as we know it, but it was a December, it was cold here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which at the time was just a colony, huddled up in Bucks County on the Delaware River were a ragtag bunch of guys. They had been run out of New York. They had suffered amazing defeats, humiliating defeats. You realize that this little ragtag Continental Army, as it was called, at its highest point, never had more than 48,000 members. And between the time they were run out of New York in August of 1776 and December of 1776, as they found themselves huddled there in the cold, during that just 3-4 month period, 11,000 of their members had left, deserted, quit, gone home to their families, said this isn't worth it. And it was interesting because morale was low. It was a time of crisis. It was a time not unlike now. We look at all that's happening in this state, in our nation, in the world. This too is a time of crisis. But it was interesting because on a cold wintry night, there was a guy named Thomas Paine. You've heard of him. You know probably what I'm about to say. But it was with that backdrop that I have just told you about that on the 19th of December, he put pen to paper, interestingly titling something, The American Crisis. And he wrote those famous words, "These are the times that try men's souls." But he then went on, we know those words, he then went on to exhort the reader. He said, it's times like this when the sunshine soldier and the summer patriot, I think I inverted those. He said they're going to fade, they're going to shirk their responsibility to their country at a time like that. And he had exhorted those readers not to be the sunshine soldiers, the sunshine patriots, the summer soldiers. George Washington read that. It was published in the Pennsylvania Journal. He had copies printed. He had copies delivered and read out loud to his men as they huddled there along this river. The vast majority of those guys had contracts with the Continental Army that were set to expire on December 31st. They were all going to be gone with no obligation, no desertion, just saying, hey, did my part. And this guy, Thomas Paine, said, don't be like those guys that left between August and now. Don't be the sunshine patriot. Don't be the summer soldier. This is wintertime. It's brutal. It's hard. It's no different today. Thomas Jefferson thought that we would have to have a revolution of some sort about every 75 years. You go back and read his writings with this amazing, noble experiment that was put into place. He believed that about every 75 years it would be torn apart, have to be put back together, perhaps with a revolution. He talked about the tree of liberty, the roots of the tree of liberty. You're familiar with these things. We say to ourselves, how fortunate we're 240 some years in, and we haven't had to have that. Have we not? You think about it. What happened about 75 years after we finally got this little fledgling country out of the gate? 1780s, we have this Constitutional Congress, a Constitution is passed. We launched this noble experiment, the United States of America. 75 years later, this country was torn apart with civil war. It was nearly lost. It took people like Abraham Lincoln, among others, to stand in the gap, take the kicks in the teeth, and do what was needed to be the difference maker. We think, well, luckily we saved that. It hasn't happened since then. Really? What happened 75 years after the end of the Civil War? The outbreak of World War II, which was our first truly, as a nation, time of peril where we may have been lost. I don't know if you're readers, I would encourage you, please pick up a book called Freedom's Forge, written by a guy named Arthur Herman, I believe his name. Freedom's Forge. If you want to understand how you think it's tenuous now, you think we've lost our industrial base now, you think we've lost our competitive advantage now, you think we are in dire straits now as a nation relative to our standing in the world, read this book to understand what things were like 75 years after the end of the Civil War, as our nation and the world were in the balance. And again, people stepped up. Well, that was then, you say. Well, what's 75 years since then? Now. This too is an American crisis. These too are the times that try men's souls. And yet, as we sit here and we watch this video that played, the singing of our national anthem, to include words and verses that we don't often even sing or pay reference to, as we hear this powerful invocation and this cry to God for providence, the same providence that our founders cried out for. How blessed we are to be Americans. I just beg of you, don't take this for granted. How blessed we are to be able to pray in the name of Jesus Christ, to be men and women of faith and of non-faith in this room in civility, but with all of our beliefs protected. To be able to pledge allegiance to this flag. How blessed we are. Let us not take this for granted. And I asked you a moment ago, why are you here? What is it that you're hoping to accomplish? Do you want a better opportunity for your family, your community, for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, for the United States of America? Each of you has come here for some reason. My background, I don't have time to really go into great detail on it. I will simply say this. I never took a political science course. I never intended to be in office. I've had one political office in my life. It was as the governor of Kentucky. But like many of you, I said something needs to be done. I looked around in 2013. I saw the apathy that had crept into our nation, the things that needed to be done, things that somebody needed to step up and address. And so I put myself forward. We'll go into that. I'm going to be meeting later with a number of the candidates that are running for governor, and you've got a lot to choose from. And so it's awesome. That's good. It's healthy. It's cathartic. This is the greatness of the American process, is choice. But my background is a simple one. I grew up in a very humble way. I won't bore you with all of it other than to say that it is the embodiment in some respects of the American dream. I shared a bedroom with my three brothers that was half the size of this stage, probably less, in a house with no central heat just south of the Canadian border. We never had a shower. We never had a TV. I'm not even kidding. We raised most of what we ate, animals and crops. It was a simple rural life. Never flew in an airplane until I was 17 years old. I wasn't the kind of kid that would have aspired to go on and do this, that, or the other thing. My high school yearbook quote was by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who wrote, "The lives of all great men remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time." That was how I thought even when I was young. I don't know why I did, coming from where I did, but again, this is the greatness of America and of the opportunity that is afforded to each and every one of us in this extraordinary country. It's been said that without vision, the people will perish. This is true. It's true for yourselves personally, for your families, for your business, for Pennsylvania. It's true for America. Without vision, the people will perish. So what is your vision? When I ran for governor, I put out what I called a blueprint for a better Kentucky. I would encourage those of you that are here, that are candidates, put out there what it is you'll do. Don't just try to be what someone wants you to be. Have conviction. I won't take you through all of it, but it addressed things like making us a right-to-work state, getting rid of prevailing wage, bringing school choice, cutting bureaucracy and red tape and regulation in our state. All of these are political losers. No one else in the race on either side was willing to put anything in writing, let alone all those political loser things. But I said these things need to be done, and I was saying this in the face of the fact at that point we'd only had 3 Republican governors in 100 years. I ended up being the 4th. It wasn't a given that I was going to get elected. We only had 44 out of 100 seats in our legislature, so all appropriations and all spending and decision-making largely came out of the House, where we only, as Republicans, had 44 of 100 seats. And in fact, Democrats had controlled our House uninterrupted since 1920, 95 years. So when I'm out there, I look perhaps like an April Fool, out there saying we need to do these things. I ended up winning that primary by the closest statewide election in the history of America. Again, you could look this up, less than 4/10,000ths of 1%. Things happen for a reason, and you have to get out there and be engaged. We've been able to get those things done. It takes somebody being willing to step up. Thousands of years ago, there was a prophet in Israel named Ezekiel. He talked about the watchman on the wall. Some of you are familiar with that. Perhaps you're familiar with it even if you didn't even know the source of that term. What are the things that ail Pennsylvania? What is it that is lurking in this state? What is it that those of you that are on the wall are seeing? You are the watchman on the wall, each and every one of you. And what Ezekiel wrote was true then is true now, is that it is incumbent upon those of us that are on the wall, those of us that are the watchmen on the wall. If we see what is happening, it is our responsibility to step up and do something about it. It's not enough to simply see it. It's not simply enough to just be aware. Sound the alarm. Do the types of things you're doing here, but don't just come here and listen. Be active, be engaged. George Washington, we saw him featured in this video. We saw those battle scenes. When they asked him to be president of the United States, he said, "Have I not done enough for my country?" There's not one of us who could say that with a straight face. Not one of us. Not me, not you, not any of us. And until we can say that, we have not done enough. So what then is our responsibility? If you're like me, I was always waiting for somebody. Again, I voted, I paid attention, I paid my taxes. I wasn't engaged in the political process, even to the degree that so many of you are. I always hoped somebody would step up, somebody who thought like me, somebody who said, hey, I have this ideology, I have this business sense, what have you. Always waiting for somebody. Who are we to think that we shouldn't be the somebody? Why should the somebody always be somebody else? The somebody's always somebody. Why shouldn't it be us? This is something for us to think about. I would have people say to me, what difference, and perhaps they've said this to you as candidates. Perhaps you've asked this of people. What difference can one person make? More than none. More than none. Seriously. History has always turned on these seminal moments where one person stood up, took it in the teeth, And history was changed because somebody was willing to stand in the gap. I run the risk of running out of time by doing this, but I want to read something to you. It'll take a minute and a half. This is the entire Psalm of Life from which that stanza that my high school yearbook quote was taken from, by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream. For the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returneth, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act, that each tomorrow find us farther than today. Art is long and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still, like muffled drums, are beating funeral marches to the grave. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb-driven cattle. Be a hero in the strife. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living present, heart within and God o'erhead. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing o'er life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing, will take heart again. Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. Powerful words, true words, applicable for where we are now and today. There was a guy, Winston Churchill, perhaps you've heard of him, a guy who, the power of one, stood in the gap, known for many things, not his humility being one of them, but nonetheless he pushed back on a moniker that he was given, often referred to as the Lion of England. He said, I'm not the lion. He said, the people of England are the lion, but history has called upon me to deliver the roar. You're the power. You're the Lion of Pennsylvania. History is calling upon you, each of you. History calls every one of us to some degree at some point in time. Small ways, large ways, maybe once, maybe more than once. But history will knock on your door. Will you be ready? Will you be prepared to answer that call? And will you be willing to answer that call? These are the questions you need to ask yourself. This is not a game. What is at stake in Pennsylvania? What is at stake for our nation? This is not a game. This is not ours versus these, us versus them, this win versus that, political power and special license plates and all that hogwash. This is bigger than that. How badly do you want to see change? Thomas Edison said, most people miss opportunity in life because it usually shows up in overalls and looks like hard work. That's the truth. There's a lot of hard work ahead of you in the next months. 2022 is going to be a year of hard work politically for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Be bold, be decisive, have conviction, be unapologetic in the things that you know. Your ideology, your faith, your conviction, be bold and unapologetic. America is worth fighting for. It truly is. This great nation that we have been blessed with is worth fighting for. People have done it for centuries. No less is expected of us. No less is expected of us now. We have quite enough sheep. We have been turned increasingly as a society into sheep-like creatures. I'm calling out to you. Be the shepherd. Stand up. Lead. Take the point. You'll be the first to face the wolves. You'll be the first to face the storms. Be the shepherd, especially you young people. If you're under the age of 25 in this room, you're the next generation. The old people like us are going to pass the baton to people like you. Be bold, have conviction. We've had 1.5 million Americans have died in uniform since this nation came into existence. 1.5 million and counting. The ultimate sacrifice for us. I asked you earlier why you're here. You probably answered that in your own mind, and you want X, you want Y, you want Z, you want to see this change. It might be specific to a single policy. It might be broader than that. Whatever it is that drew you here, How badly do you want it? How badly do you want it? More than just to take the time to drive to Harrisburg and register for a conference and sit and mingle for a couple of days? How badly? Do you want it as badly as the people who came over here in rickety boats, risking their lives for freedoms that we now take for granted? It's our greatest threat in this nation is our apathy and the fact that we have it so good, we're so blessed, we're so comfortable, we can afford to not care and think that it won't matter. And indeed, maybe it won't for now, until it does. Do you want it as badly as those people who risked their lives to get here for freedom of religion and speech and thought? You talk about 1776. Do you want it as badly as those men huddled there at McConkey's Ferry and subsequently at Valley Forge, who in that winter of 1776, in the months after these next couple of victories, even so, were in such a sad state that if they were lucky enough to have shoes, they literally ate their shoes to keep from starving to death. Do you want it that badly? Do you want it as badly as the men who stepped off transport carriers on Omaha Beach, seeing their buddies dead by the hundreds on the beach in front of them, stepping over dead bodies, the ocean running red with blood of guys that they had just been sitting in those vehicles with as they were landing on these beaches, having to go up there, climb cliffs, facing down machine guns to take those out, to then march inward, sometimes hundreds of miles, into a country that wasn't even theirs, to spread freedom and liberty and opportunity. Do you want it that badly? Do you want it as badly as a guy who sat in a Birmingham jail and penned a letter that pricked the conscience of a nation to do the things that should have been done long before? Do you want it that badly? Because I would submit to you, if you don't, if you are not willing to give some modern-day equivalent of your own lives, fortunes, and sacred honor, then you don't deserve it, nor do I. If we are not willing to do that, to give everything, we don't deserve the better America that we're looking for. Who are we to think we don't have to sacrifice like those that have preceded us? I'll leave you with this. I pray for my children for two things. And it's my prayer for you here in Pennsylvania, in the decision-making that you are going to have to do in the weeks and months ahead. It's not going to be easy. I pray that my children will have wisdom and discernment to know the difference between what is right and what is wrong. We live in a mixed-up world. Up is down and in is out. Right is wrong. I could give you 1,000 examples. You know them. You see them every day in the headlines. Makes us wonder what's happened to our country. I pray that my children will have wisdom to know the difference between right and wrong. But secondarily, I pray that they will have the courage to do what is right. And this is my prayer for each of you, that you will have the wisdom, the discernment, the understanding to know what you should do in the days and the weeks and the months ahead, how you should vote, who you should get behind, how you should coalesce behind the people that will be the nominees, because what is at stake is critical. I pray that you will have that understanding. And I pray secondarily that you will have the courage to do it. You say you want a better Pennsylvania? You say you want a better America? How badly do you want it?